The largest study of its kind shows AI assistants misrepresent news content 45% of the time, regardless of the language or territory. That's a scary headline, and we can all agree that is not what we want to hear. We want to see AI assistants that can actually give us factual information. And if it's 45% of the time, that is a mad level of inaccuracy. This is the headline that's going around. This was published late last week. And I've seen people already saying, oh, AI is wrong 50% of the time. Hang on, that's not quite what they're saying. People just read the headline and ignore everything else. So there are a couple of studies. If you're on TikTok, you won't be able to see them, but I'll read them out. I'll put them in the newsletter tomorrow as well. There are two reports. So there's one called News Integrity in AI Assistance, which came out October 2025, and another called Audience Use and Perceptions of AI Assistance for News, also in October 2025. One is with Ipsos, and the other is with the EBU, which is the European Broadcasting Union. So the BBC is involved in a lot of this research, trying to work out how people are using AI for news and if they are trusting that content, even when they probably shouldn't. I agree with the BBC on this one. So there's a couple of headline pieces of data here. Key findings: 45% of all AI answers had at least one significant issue. 31% of responses showed serious sourcing problems, missing, misleading, or incorrect attributions. 20% contained major accuracy issues, including hallucinated details and outdated information. That's pretty bad. Gemini performed worse with significant issues in 76% of responses. That's Google Gemini, more than double the other assistants, largely due to its poor sourcing performance. That's interesting because Gemini is behind AI overviews. So that's going to be where a lot of people are going to be getting their updates directly from Google. If you Googled Japanese election, for example, they just had an election last week, it might give you a summary at the top of Google, and that's going to be based on Gemini. So if 76% of those responses have significant issues, that's a huge problem. And then comparison between the BBC's results earlier this year and this study shows some improvements, but still high level of error. This is the bit that I actually want to focus on, because they say some improvements, but when you actually look at the data, it shows an awful lot of improvements considering it's been 6 months. And I think this is the key point that we need to remember. The study is basically worried that people are no longer reading the news, they're no longer looking things up, they're no longer doing their own research, but instead they're relying on AI overviews or their AI to give them the news. And they're saying this is a big problem. We have to remember the BBC is a news organisation, so they are not unbiased in this. The fact that they have ordered all of this research and they're paying for this research is driven by that. That said, it's still quite important work. We also need to remember that people already don't really read the news. People will read headlines like this. The largest study of its kind shows AI assistants misrepresent news contents 45% of the time. That is what they're going to go away with. They're not going to read the actual studies. You guys who are watching these kind of videos and who are in my newsletter who will actually look at the studies and delve a little bit deeper are in a minority. Most people will not bother with that. And we saw that with the MIT study a few months ago, the one about 95% of all AI pilot projects fail. That was a completely junk study, completely junk. It wasn't even a study, but everybody saw the 95% and everyone on LinkedIn was like, oh no, AI is failing. Nonsense. They did not do any reading. Similar here, where 45% of all AI answers had at least one significant issue. That's really scary. I had thought about this. I thought, how accurate are news articles on the web anyway, like normally? And there was a piece of research done in 2020 where they studied journalists and tried to find out what the error rate was. The results demonstrate that 69% stories contained errors. And the main cause of such errors was in the use of secondary sources instead of primary sources. These errors transcended national borders. Time speed has only been a minor role in the emergence of correction of errors. This particular piece of research from Hungarian University found that in journalism as a whole, 69% of the stories had errors. So that puts this in a different context. This sheds a different light on it, because the BBC is saying 45% of all the AI answers had one significant issue. Okay, 45% is lower than 69%. So if nearly 70% of human written news stories are having an error in them, that is more than the 45% from artificial intelligence. We do need to put this in the perspective of how are the humans doing? And apparently not very well. Of course, it's not necessarily an apples to apple comparison. We'd have to look at the methodology, but we do need to think about the context of data that we hear whenever we are looking at information like this.